run this group, mentorship group, and I have to say that Nilesh is one of the most brilliant people I've ever seen. He's worked hard to stand where he is, and he's also a very passionate teacher. He loves teaching young kids like you guys. So, Nilesh, you can take over. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Okay, so we'll start from where we left off in the last class that was taken by Dr. Vinayak sir. So we discussed inguinal hernia then. I hope you all can see my screen. So we talked about a complete hernia then. And so talked about something what is called as a marsupialization of the complete hernia sac. So what that means is that there's a deep ring, there's a superficial ring, and there's a scrotum. So the complete hernia means that the sac comes from the deep ring into the superficial ring into the scrotum. So when we're doing a hernia surgery, we ligate and transfix the sac at the deep ring, and the distal portion of the sac, we simply incise it anteriorly and lay it open. And we talked about the importance of this maneuver is to prevent a secondary hydrocele. So with this background, I'll start off with today's session. So hydrocele is nothing but collection of fluid between the two layers of tunica vaginalis. Fine. So a little bit of embryology here. There is something known as a processus vaginalis, which is just a fold of peritoneum, which comes from the deep ring into the inguinal canal to the superficial ring and then into the scrotum. So this processus vaginalis ultimately forms the two layers of tunica vaginalis. In due course of embryogenesis, this processus vaginalis obliterates. And when it fails to obliterate, it's called a persistently patent processus vaginalis. When this fails to obliterate, what we get is a congenital hernia plus a congenital hydrocele. So what happens is this processus vaginalis in due course of embryogenesis will obliterate, and only the two layers of tunica vaginalis will remain. Mind you, this is the testes here. Fine. So when this happens normally, in case of a patent processus vaginalis, this obliteration will not happen. And therefore, there will be some intestinal contents coming out through this processus vaginalis and some fluid accumulation. So this is formation of congenital hydrocele. Now, anywhere in this processus vaginalis, if there is some failure of obliteration, we'll get a hydrocele. So let's say this is the processus vaginalis, and normally I've shown it in the last picture how it gets obliterated. But if the entire thing does not get obliterated, we've talked that this is called a congenital hydrocele. If it obliterates normally, then the two layers, and there is some fluid accumulation between the two layers, then we call it a vaginal hydrocele. This is the testis here, and this is the cord. Fine. So vaginal hydrocele is when the entire processus vaginalis is obliterated, but only that part of processus vaginalis which is encasing the testes, that is the tunica vaginalis. If there is fluid accumulation, then we call it a vaginal hydrocele. If in case there is failure of obliteration, let's say in the cord area, and there is fluid accumulation in the cord as well as the testes, this is called an infantile hydrocele. And in case only the cord part fails to obliterate, we call it a hydrocele of cord. So to summarize, let's say this is the testes, fine, and this is the superficial ring. And now I'll be drawing the obliterated processus vaginalis. This forms the tunica. So if there is accumulation here, it's called vaginal hydrocele. If there is failure of obliteration and the in the cord also, in the cord and testes, then it's called an infantile hydrocele. If there is just a failure of obliteration in the cord, it's called hydrocele of the cord. And if the entire thing, this entire thing fails to obliterate, we call it a congenital hydrocele. So now we'll talk about the clinical presentation. How will the patient present to you? So the first thing that you see in history is the demographic history, and you see the age of the patient, whether the patient is a child, whether the patient is a young adult, or if the patient is elderly. So remember, in a lower age groups, the cause is usually benign. So the purpose of clinical examination and history taking is to find out the cause of hydrocele. So in young age, the cause is usually benign. So in child, we've talked about a congenital cause, which is usually seen in children up to the age of 1 year. In young adults, we can see what is known as a primary hydrocele, primary or a vaginal hydrocele, or you can see a secondary hydrocele secondary to epididymoarchitis, secondary to torsion testis, secondary to trauma, and in the elderly population, we can see it as being secondary to a tumor, a testicular tumor. But if an elderly or a middle-aged patient comes to you with a long history, it could also be a primary or a vaginal hydrocele. So the first thing that you see in clinical features in history is the age. Now the patient will come to you with the swelling, scrotal swelling of mostly a long duration history, which is why if an elderly or a young adult or even a middle-aged person that is not a child comes to you with acute history or swelling, then you have to always think of a secondary cause. It could be tumor. You have to rule out a tumor. So a swelling, scrotal swelling for long duration, it will be insidious in onset. It will be gradually progressive. You will move on to examination. On examination, you will see a scrotal swelling. Let's say that the patient comes with a right side scrotal swelling. So on examination, you will, if it's a hydrocele, and in such situation, you will be able to get above the swelling. On palpation, you will be able to get above the swelling. So remember, in any inguinoscrotal swellings, your two DDs are a hernia and a hydrocele. And to differentiate between two, the most important clinical test is to see if you can get above a swelling. Now, this is not 100% true in hydroceles, because we've talked about congenital hydroceles where the processus vaginalis is patent from the top, from the inguinal canal. So if it is patent, the swelling of hydrocele can be there also. Or an infantile hydrocele where the tunica, the processus vaginalis is patent around the cord. Even there, you'll find a swelling which you cannot get above. So it is not always true that you can get above a swelling over a hydrocele. Then the second thing on palpation is that there will be fluctuation. So remember, with your middle and ring finger, you will fix the testicular swelling. And with the index finger and the thumb, you will palpate the testis, the swelling, after fixing it. So if on palpation, after fixing the swelling, you press the swelling from your right hand index finger and your opposite hand, thumb or index finger is pushed, then it means that there is some cystic collection within the testis. Within that swelling, there is some fluid which is dislocating from the area you've pushed to the area that you feel it for. So that's what fluctuation is. In any swelling where you find fluctuation to be present, the next thing that you have to check is for transillumination. Now, a vaginal hydrocele will be brilliantly transilluminant, and because it is the most common presentation of hydrocele, we say in general that a hydrocele swelling, you can get above the swelling, there is fluctuation, and the swelling is brilliantly transluminant. So just as a side point, what all hydroceles are there which have negative transillumination? That is, there is no transillumination. So if the hydrocele has got blood, that is, if it is a hematocele, you will not find transillumination. Second, in cases of chronic hydrocele, the scrotal wall or the tunica is thickened. So in chronic presentations also, let's say if the patient has swelling for about 10 years, in a chronic hydrocele swelling, you will not find transillumination. So we've talked about examination. We've said that there is scrotal swelling that you can get above. When you palpate for fluctuation, it is present. In any fluctuating swelling, you test for transillumination, it is there. The testis is not palpable separately. Mostly that's the case because the tunica vaginalis will cover the testis in its entirety. So if there is fluid inside the tunica vaginalis and you can feel that fluid as a swelling, then you will not be able to palpate the testis separately. And lastly, most importantly, there is no cuff impulse. So a feature of getting above the swelling and no cuff impulse on examination will rule out your hernia. Now they say that hernia and hydroceles are clinical diagnosis, and they are right. You don't need any investigation to confirm whether it's a hernia or a hydrocele, or for that matter, any hernia case, any hydrocele case. It's not just about differentiating the two things. A patient may have a hernia with a hydrocele, but I'm saying that you can diagnose it confirmatively just by clinical assessment, clinical examination. An aid to your clinical diagnosis will be an ultrasound scan. They say nowadays that ultrasound scan is an extension of physical examination. So you have to get an ultrasound scan for all scrotal swellings. It's a must. It's a must because there are things that you can miss in examination. There are things that you can miss in history. Or even if you don't miss anything, it's always better to have a confirmation, a radiological confirmation of the same thing. Ultrasound is again operator dependent. So it has to be done by a doctor, a radiologist does it. Mostly nowadays, the trend is that surgeons are doing their own ultrasounds. So basics in ultrasound, if we can try to know, and I'm guilty of it because even I don't know it, but it's advisable to know basic ultrasound so that we can examine our patients better. Now, on ultrasound, what we are trying to see is to, number one, confirm our diagnosis, and number two, we have to always rule out malignancy, because we talked about hydrocele being secondary to a testicular tumor. So in such a case, many of our the residents in government setups, especially, they do unsupervised work, which means there's many a times there's no senior resident also available. There are no consultants. So you're seeing a patient in the OPD, you're evaluating the patient on your own. And for a simple thing like a hydrocele, you may not show the patient to the consultant and you take the patient to the minor OT and decide on operating it under local anesthesia. But the problem with this is, if on exploration you find that there's a tumor there or there's another testicular swelling, it's not just a simple vaginal hydrocele, then you have upstaged the tumor. You have upstaged the tumor from stage T1, let's assume it's a T1 stage, to a T4 stage, where there are tumor deposits in the scrotum. And not just that, not just T1 to T4, you've also changed the lymph nodal status. Because as you know, the testicular tumor will go to a para-aortic lymph node. But the scrotum is drained by the inguinal lymph nodes. So you convert a T1, maybe N0, N1, M0 disease to a T4, M1A. That is a disaster. That is a short disaster. If you convert a stage 1 malignancy into a stage 3 or stage 4 malignancy without any contribution of the disease itself, then it's not tolerable at all. So therefore, it is my humble request to all you young surgeons that always get an ultrasound of a testicular swelling. So now, when you get an ultrasound, you're looking at causes of hydrocele, so that you should know what you're looking for in an ultrasound. That's how the dependence of ultrasound will shift from a radiologist to a surgeon. You'll not be dependent on a radiologist anymore. If you know what to see on an ultrasound and you know what to look for, you can do it on your own. Then it's just a matter of a month or 2-month training in ultrasound. So the first thing is the vaginal hydrocele, which I said is the most common. On ultrasound, you will find just fluid collection. Between the 2 layers of tunica vaginalis, and the testis and its vascularity plus cord will all be normal. In secondary hydroceles, let's say due to or epididymoarchitis, you'll see the cord is thickened. Similarly, you can have torsion although torsion is clinically very evident, patient will come present with pain. Then a traumatic hydrocele. A trauma could be trauma to the blunt trauma to the testes, let's say a cricket ball, a week back, or maybe a month back. So now you can find some blood and some fluid. Again, the cord may or may not be thickened. And lastly, the major reason why you do ultrasound for this patient is to rule out tumor, rule out malignancy. So once you've examined the patient, you've confirmed your diagnosis. It's a vaginal hydrocele. That is, there is defective absorption of the fluid in the between the two layers of tunica vaginalis. Now, if it's a small size vaginal hydrocele, you can simply reassure the patient. Small size means that the testicular size, the size difference between the two testes is less than 2 centimeters. You can reassure the patient. Nothing to be done. In a large size, long duration presentation, you may offer the patient some sort of surgery. Many a times, patients come to us with hydrocele who are declared unfit in their government service. Let's say an armed forces job or a civil service job, they're declared unfit because they have a hydrocele and they're unwilling for surgery. Let's say their clinical examination is due for the next day. Then you may also offer the patient aspiration of the fluid. But remember, any scrotal aspiration, you have to only do after ruling out malignancy for the same reason that we discussed earlier, that you can convert a T1 stage malignancy into a T4 stage and an M0 stage to an M1A stage. So always and always, before aspiration, you have to rule out malignancy. That's also true for surgery, but I'm assuming that before surgery, you will get an ultrasound, but before an aspiration, you may forget to get an ultrasound. So it's not excusable. You have to get an ultrasound to rule out malignancy before aspiration. So aspiration for patients who are not willing for surgery, plus minus some sort of sclerotherapy. Sclerotherapy is given by usually by two things, either a tetracycline or polydocanol. So moving on to what you're here for, surgery and surgical steps for the first surgery that you'll ever do in residency, that is a surgery for hydrocele. Now remember, your senior, before you are given an hydrocele, independent hydrocele, you will be assisting many times with your senior. And before your senior lets you operate on any hydrocele, he'll ask you one basic question, one basic anatomy question he'll always ask you. And he will ask you because he himself would be forgetting it. And that very basic question is, tell me the layers of scrotum before you attempt on doing a hydrocele surgery alone. So just for the sake of your senior, your second year or your third year, you need to know the layers of scrotum. This is important because the first layer is skin, as you know, there is no subcutaneous tissue, So the next layer is tarsus muscle. Then the third layer is external spermatic fascia. Then you get the cremaster muscle. Then you get the internal spermatic fascia. And lastly, you get the tunica vaginalis. tunica vaginalis, parietal layer, and then the visceral layer, and then lastly the testis, and the outermost covering of testis, is tunica albuginea. So these layers of scrotum is a must know before you attempt your first independent hydrocele surgery, because if you don't know this, you will not get this surgery. You'll not get to perform this surgery. And if it's also an exam question, if you don't answer this question, most likely you'll fail. And that's why it's important, because when you're operating on a hydrocele, we can never differentiate these layers. You can never see external somatic fascia. We can never say this is the internal somatic fascia. Only the tunica vaginalis you can say. The dartus muscle non-closure you can say. But rest everything else, the external fascia, internal fascia, and the cremaster muscle, they are all fused together. Therefore, we tend to forget this also. Now imagine you doing a lab poly, you'll never forget Callet's anatomy, because you are always dissecting the cystic artery, cystic duct, ligating it, cutting it. Here you cannot identify, you're not dissecting these structures, therefore you tend to forget. And so to repeat, I'll just say that the layer of scrotum, skin, there's no subcutaneous tissue, there's dartus muscle, there's external squamatic fascia, cremaster muscle, internal squamatic fascia, and tunica vaginalis, parietal layer. So now the surgical options that we have in hydrocele. One, very famous Lord's plication. Then you have the Jaboulet procedure. Then you have something what you call as a bottleneck technique. And lastly, you have something which is called as window technique. Usually don't do window or bottleneck technique. It's not done. We may either choose between Lord's plication or a Jaboulet procedure, wherein we give preference to a Jaboulet's procedure. I'll quickly tell you what's there in the Lord's plication. We do not evert the sac. I'll tell you what eversion of sac means. We do not evert the sac. We've discussed that hydrocele is collection of fluid between the two layers of tunica vaginalis. So we simply open the tunica vaginalis, the parietal layer, we drain the fluid, and we plicate, we just suture the parietal layer of tunica vaginalis on itself. That's it. We never excise the sac. And that's the advantage of a Lord's plication. Because we never excise the sac, there is no bleeding, minimal bleeding, and therefore there is minimal chance of forming a hematoma post-surgery. No scrotal hematoma. We choose Lord's plication only when the sac, that is the tunica vaginalis, is thin-walled. Only if it's thin-walled will we go for this procedure. So now we, just a minute. I think I've used up the limit of whiteboards. Okay, fine. So now we move to Jabulis. What we do in Jabulis, let's say the patient came to you with the right side hydrocele. So this is the testis. This is the scrotum, sorry. This is the scrotum. This is the left side testis, it's normal. And this is the right side scrotum. This is the median raphe. So we go for a paramedial incision. Okay, before this, I'm sorry. Before this, I missed what anesthesia will give. Mostly, I told you that we operate these patients under local anesthesia. We may also give spinal anesthesia. For children, only for children, we go for GA, those who cannot tolerate spinal. So for local anesthesia, what we give is a cord block. We use 2% lignocaine injection. We palpate for the cord. We hold the cord in our hands near the superficial ring, and we palpate for the cord here. We pick it up with our thumb and index finger, and we inject approximately 10 ml of 2% lignocaine to give a cord block. The way I was trained was that you give a bilateral cord block, 10%, 10 ml, 2% lignocaine, 10 ml on the right side, 10 ml on the left side. Doesn't matter which side you're operating, the opposite side will have some sensation when you're doing the surgery. So to give a good pain relief, we give a bilateral cord block, and plus we may infiltrate the scrotal skin on our site of incision. So that is the local anesthetic technique. So after giving a liberal local anesthesia, what we do is we ask the assistant to stretch the skin. Remember, scrotal skin is very thin. It's very thin, and I'll tell you the clinical importance of this thin skin when we come on closure. So this is the median raphe. This is the scrotal swelling. You ask the assistant to stretch the skin, and then you make a paramedial incision. After incising the skin, in minor OTs, most minor OTs, you may not have cautery. So all the hemostasis you have to achieve through pressure and sutures wherever required. So after giving a skin incision, you, with a 15 number blade, you keep on incising the tissues till you reach a white glistening structure, pearly white glistening structure, which will be the parietal layer of tunica vaginalis. So as you reach there, you stop your incision and you create a space around the tunica vaginalis in all directions. So you create 360-degree space. Yeah, I hope you're understanding this point, that once you've incised the skin, you incise the dartus muscle, you incise the fascia, which you cannot dissect, you cannot see, but what you can see after incising the dartus muscle is the white glistening structure. Once you've reached the white glistening structure, it means that you've given an incision over all the layers of scrotum till tunica vaginalis, till the parietal layer of tunica vaginalis. Once you've reached the parietal layer of tunica vaginalis, you, with blunt dissection, with your fingers, finger dissection, and with artery forceps, you create space all around the testis in a 360-degree area with blunt dissection. Once you've created space, now what happens is the testis, along with the tunica and with the fluid collected inside it, will come out of the scrotum. The scrotal sac will hang loose and it will come out in your hand. So you simply nick with that 15 number blade, you nick the parietal layer of tunica vaginalis. And voila, you get baptized with the holy water. Remember, this fluid is sterile in most cases, but in cases where it's a secondary hydrocele, secondary to, let's say, epididymoarchitis, or filariasis, it may contain some amount of pus cells or cholesterol or fat, respectively. But in vaginal hydroceles, primary hydroceles, mostly this fluid will be sterile. So if your senior plays holy with this fluid with you, that means you've been baptized. It's fine. Happens with everybody. So once you nick the parietal layer of tunica vaginalis, the fluid starts to come out. You suction that fluid, completely empty the tunica vaginalis, and then now I'm moving to the next page. Remember the seventh step. You, with the help of a tissue cutting scissors, you cut the tunica vaginalis in a cephalocaudal direction. So what you're left with is, this is the tunica, and this is how you've cut it. The testis is inside, and the cord is also inside. So this is the innermost structure. This is the incision. This is the incision on the tunica vaginalis, and this is the tunica vaginalis. Once you've increased the incision, the nick that you've put on the tunica vaginalis, once you've increased it cephalocaudally, then you simply evert it. When you evert it, this will be the testis. This is the cord. And the tunica, because it's inverted, I'll only draw it with the yellow side. The blue side has been inverted. And what you're left with is testis hanging loosely without it outermost covering, that is the tunica vaginalis, because you've everted the sac. You everted the tunica vaginalis. And now you start with the suturing of this layer. The incision that you made over tunica vaginalis, you have to suture this. Mind you, we suture this loosely because when we marsupialize or we evert the sac, there is a tendency of the cord gets encased. Cord gets encased by the two layers of tunica vaginalis. So the cord gets encased and we suture it tightly, the cord will get compressed. There could be compression of the testicular artery, the pampiniform plexus of veins, also the vas deferens. It will cause post-operative pain, plus minus atrophy of the testis. So always when you're suturing the two layers of the tunica vaginalis after marsupialization, you keep one finger inside, one finger space should be left behind for the cord to avoid its compression. At this stage, you may also excise the extra part of tunica vaginalis. But the problem with excision of tunica vaginalis is bleeding. And once it bleeds, there's a risk of hematoma. There's a risk of hematoma formation post-surgery. So if you can avoid it as far as possible, if you can avoid it, avoid excision. But if you cannot avoid it, it's a very big sac, it's a chronic hydrocele, then you may excise the sac, but you have to make sure that you maintain hemostasis after excision. So once you've everted the sac, put the sutures, you start with the closure. So now in closure, I told you we don't get to differentiate the layers of scrotum. So simply what you close is the dartus muscle. And then you close the skin. So I'll tell you the sutures that we use for after eversion of sac and suturing the tunica vaginalis. We use a vicryl 2O or 3O continuous. For the dartus muscle as well, we use vicryl 2O continuous. And for skin, I told you the skin is thin. Scrotal skin is very thin. So if you put simple sutures over scrotal skin, more often than not, the two edges of the skin will get inverted. And you know, when we have to approximate the skin, the two edges should be everted, not inverted. So to have a everted edges of skin, we have to use mattress sutures. So mattress non-absorbable nylon 2O interrupted is what we use for skin. Now what we're left with is the age-old question, drain or no drain? So the answer to this question is very simple. You have to always put a drain. Why? Because you may be excising the sac, excising the extra part of tunica vaginalis. And when you excise the sac, the sac will be bleeding. The edges will be bleeding. And if you put pressure, it may get controlled, but later on it can bleed again. So more often than not, you end up with a hematoma formation post-surgery. Now to prevent that hematoma, you simply put a drain before you start with the closure of dartus muscle. And always remember, when you put a drain anywhere, you have to take out the drain outside of the suture line. It should not be coming from the same suture line. Here, a negative section drain will be preferable. But even if you don't have a negative suction drain, what we use in my setup is a glove drain. So what we do is we cut open the distalmost part of a glove of the finger and just place it. The glove becomes a cylinder, hollow cylinder. And simply place it after suturing the tunica vaginalis and placing it in the scrotal pouch before the closure of dartus muscle.
This point, Nilesh, can you
Yes,
hear
sir.
me?
Yeah, yes.
I what I do is I do something different.
Yes, sir.
I use a corrugated drain, which is very similar to your glove drain.
Yes,
but
sir. Yes, sir.
one point we have to note while using a corrugated drain is that
yes, sir.
What I do is I tend to put a triangle inside. That is, you cut the corrugated drain. Corrugated drain is nothing but a flat tube. Okay, that flat drain, I make a triangle, or I cut the edges so that it appears to be a little angulated. Like this, for example. What do you call it? Just a second. I'll just draw it on the screen. Like this. This part goes inside the wound, so that when you're removing the drain, you know that the drain has come out if you see this edge.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, right. So this is one thing. And personally, I generally don't use a nylon for one reason. I mean, most people do tend to use a nylon. I tend to use an absorbable skin suture, such as vicryl rapide.
Okay, sir.
Because removing the suture removal in a scrotal skin is very difficult.
Yes, sir.
Even though textbooks say nylon, my personal experience.
Yes, sir.
The second thing is, if your staff cuts the nylon thread a little short, it often gets confused with the hair in the scrotum.
Correct, sir.
As we all know, Indian scrotums are quite hairy. And when the patient comes for suture removal after about 12 days, we find that the black of the nylon is often confused with the black hair. So we tend to miss it.
Yes, it happens.
If you want to use a non-absorbable material, go for something like a proline, but again, proline can cause a sinus. More chance of causing sinus. So I generally tend to prefer a vicryl rapide, which is rapidly absorbable, which is something which you use in circumsuture. But unfortunately, vicryl rapide is not commonly available in government hospitals.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so sometimes what I do is I just use a normal Vicryl.
Okay, sir.
And when the tensile strength of the Vicryl disappears in 2 weeks, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
Vicryl takes 60 to 90 days to get absorbed, but the tensile
Mm-hmm.
strength of the Vicryl becomes quite negligible after about 3 weeks. So after
Mm-hmm.
20 days, I ask them to take a good bath with soap and water. So the
Okay. Okay, sir.
Vicryl doesn't get actually absorbed inside, but the Vicryl
Mm-hmm.
falls off when you're having a bath.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Okay,
Okay, sir.
but I mean, this is my personal technique. So this is what I do. Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, sir. So, sir, do you use what suture do you use if you're using Vicryl? Do you put simple sutures or
You
subcuticular?
know, just like you told, I prefer mattress. Scrotal skin
Oh, yes, sir.
always tends to
Yes,
get
sir.
avoided.
Always matters. Always matters.
Always matters.
Yes, 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 sir.
And for
Because,
darkness, 20
yes, sir.
Vicryl, yes.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's what, sir. The scrotal skin, because to summarize for the audience, the scrotal skin is very thin, very thin. So if you try to put simple sutures on scrotal skin, then more often than not, that the two edges of the skin will invert. And once they invert, it's very difficult for the wound to heal. So the patient will come back to you when once you remove the sutures, the skin wound will again gape. It'll be a problem for the patient for a long time. You should simply put white mattress sutures, be of any type. After 7 days, the suture line will be fine. Nothing wrong with the suture line. Post-operatively, you give the patient scrotal support. So that finishes off with the Jaboulet technique. Just a word about bottleneck technique. So what we do in bottleneck technique is that we incise the tunica vaginalis. We incise the tunica vaginalis. I'm sorry. This is the testis. So we incise the tunica vaginalis circumferentially in a 2 centimeter margin. We excise this part. The part that I've shaded, we just remove it out. And only a 2 centimeter margin around the testis is left. And this free edge of the tunica vaginalis, we simply suture it on itself. We tack it on itself, and that's how the sac remains open, and it avoids a accumulation of fluid. I've personally never done this, or neither have I seen this. I don't think we do it very often. And then lastly, the last surgical technique is a window technique, where instead of in Jaboulet, we were giving a nick on the parietal layer of tunica vaginalis, and then we were increasing that nick in the craniocaudal direction. In the window technique, after nicking the tunica vaginalis, we give a cruciate incision. And after cruciate incision, we simply again just plicate it on itself. So again, the sac remains open. So that completes our operative procedures in Hydrocele. Of course, this is all about vaginal Hydrocele. If there's a secondary Hydrocele, so you have to treat the cause also. If there's a patient of chronic epididymolysis, you may have tuberculosis also, genitourinary tuberculosis. So you have to investigate the cause. Many a times in our setup, we find that the geographical location of these patients is from Bihar. Now we know that Bihar is an endemic region for having filariasis. So in patients of filariasis also, patient may have a secondary Hydrocele. So this will cause recurrence. Even if you do a Jaboulet procedure, you've done a definitive Hydrocele surgery, patient will come back to you with the recurrence. In such situations, post-surgery, you have no option but to aspirate the fluid and use a sclerosing agent along with giving anti-filarial drugs. So that completes my talk on Hydrocele. I hope you found it useful for yourself. If you have any doubts, feel free to ask me right now. Any doubt, anybody? Okay, Vishnu asked, sir, how do you identify cord at the superficial ring for local anesthesia? Very good question, Vishnu. So what we do is, whenever you palpate, so next time in any patient that you see in the OPD or in the ward, you must palpate the genitalia of the patient. So once you palpate the testes, just move your finger just above the testes, and you'll find a cord-like structure. You may find some tubular structures there, maybe compressible, maybe non-compressible. But once you try to compress it, patient will have some discomfort, some pain. So you know that's the cord. Now simply trace the cord till the pubic tubercle, till the pubic region. So once you trace it till the pubic region, you know that's the cord. You gently lift it up with your index finger and your thumb, and you inject local anesthesia. I hope that answers your question, Vishnu. Okay. Sarath asks, what is the treatment duration followed for filarial hydrocele? So it depends whether the patient has taken anti-filarial treatment earlier or not. If not, and you've diagnosed the filariasis in that patient based on your history, then you have to give, I'm forgetting the name of the drug. You give that course for DEC, yes, right. DEC for 21 days, 100 mg BD. Okay, somebody asked, what about subcuticular sutures for scrotal skin closure? It will be easy to remove it. So subcuticular sutures, if you're using, then better is to not use a nylon suture, nylon 4O for subcuticular. Use an absorbable suture for subcuticular suture, no matter where you're doing the closure there. But for scrotum, my personal experience is that mattress suture is the best, because subcuticular again may have some wound complications. The area is also dirty. So it's better if you use a mattress suture, which is you can remove after 7 days. Okay, so somebody asked, can you please explain about infantile hydrocele alone? So for infantile hydrocele, what happens is that there is there is persistent patency of the processus vaginalis over the cord as well as the testes. But the processus vaginalis is completely obliterated in the inguinal canal. So because it is obliterated in the inguinal canal, the cystic swelling, if there is fluid accumulation, if there is infantile hydrocele, the fluid will be accumulated in the cord, around the cord, as well as around the testes. So therefore, in these patients, you may not be able to get above the swelling, in a scrotal swelling, and you may be confused with a inguinal hernia. But again, in this swelling, there will be no cuff impulse, and the swelling will be fluctuant and will be transluminant. So for such swellings, yes, you after ruling out malignancy, after doing an ultrasound, you can operate. There is no problem. You have to operate these patients to enlarge hydroceles for the patients to get relieved of its symptoms. Should we operate on cord hydrocele? So hydrocele of the cord will not resolve on its own. If the cord hydrocele is causing some discomfort to the patient and the patient is symptomatic, the patient has come to you, you have to operate. The procedure will be the same, even though uh, the the hydrocele will not extend till the testes. The procedure is the same. You may also, under ultrasound guidance, try for an aspiration. But mostly, whenever you aspirate, there will always be recurrence, and the recurrence is very quick. It will reappear in a week's time, a week, 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. Any other questions? What should we do if the cord is injured? So, if the cord is injured, you check for the age of the patient. See, if the cord is injured, there is nothing much you can do. Therefore, while operating, you have to take all precautions not to injure the cord. You have to carefully dissect. This is occurs more common in hernia surgery. The cord injury is slightly rare, but see, if you've incised the tunica vaginalis and by mistake the cord has come, the incision that you've given is a longitudinal incision. So in a longitudinal incision, there's a better chance for the cord to be relieved. That means the cord is not injured because the cord is also traveling parallel to your incision. But in a transverse incision, you will more likely to injure the cord. It happens very rarely in hydrocele surgery. If it happens, you can't do anything. And just explain the patient what has happened. And mostly, in all cases, you have to avoid any sort of injury to the cord.
Participants? Nilesh, can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir.
Anything else to add, Nilesh? Okay. Can scrotal incision be given transversely on the side of hydrocele? Okay. So, I'll take this question. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, sir.
Yeah. So, the thing with actually the lines of Langer's lines in the scrotum are actually transverse, if you actually think about it. So, so even though the traditional method of hydrocele, large incision, vertical incision is actually preferred for larger hydroceles, for most smaller hydroceles, you can actually go for a transverse incision. In fact, some of the older textbook, which is Blandy's of urology, they recommend a transverse incision because they feel that the wound healing is even faster in a transverse incision. So many surgeons all over this country, some of them use a transverse incision. So there's no harm in using a transverse incision. Your take on this, Nilesh?
Yeah, sir, I agree. There's no harm in using a transverse incision. In fact, for many patients to perform a orchidopexy, we can give a transverse incision. But my only thing is when you're cutting the tunica, it's advisable to cut it, incise it longitudinally for the same reason that the cord is there longitudinally. So
exactly.
If there is some injury through your incision, the cord is less likely to be injured in a longitudinal incision.
Exactly. Makes sense.
Yes.
One more advantage of using a longitudinal incision is it is easier to approach the other side, opposite side, because it gives you an entire access to the other side of the septum.
Yes.
And
yes.
approach the other side through the same incision. So otherwise, there is no harm in
for
using
bilateral. Yes, sir. For bilateral hydroceles, we can also give an incision in the median raphe and approach both the scrotal cavities through the same incision, same skin.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Any other doubts? So, anything else to add, Nilesh?
No, sir. I think.
Okay.
Thank you for my time.
You can put your feedback in the comments and on the group, preferably on the group. And I think we all enjoyed this session. Nilesh was extremely elaborate and started from scratch. So I think, I miss having a senior like Nilesh when I was in college, I guess. So you guys are incredibly lucky to have Nilesh with you. Next week, we are planning a session on MRCS, how to approach MRCS as a general surgery resident in India. Okay, so we're getting a special speaker, Dr. S. Kumar from Delhi. He's a senior MRCS faculty, and he has offered to help you guys out with regards to preparing for MRCS while doing a general surgery residency. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Nilesh.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Oh, no,
It was lovely, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.